This podcast contains explicit language.
Holy merd.
Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go. STM. Safety contact.
From Assignment X, thesoniashow.com, and Amalgamated Storytelling, this is the Dorking Out Show, the podcast for people who love stories from movies, TV, books, podcasts, and everywhere else.
Welcome to episode 95 of Dorking Out, our weekly status check on Star Trek Discovery. This is the What's Past Is Prologue edition. Returning today to talk about Star Trek Discovery is my favorite living critic, Jeff Bond, and the newly minted host of Bonds of Geekdom, a new podcast about nerd things set to launch soon to fill the sorely underserved market for nerds on the internet. He is also the author of several non-fiction Star Trek books and wrote the official book on Seth McFarland's The Orville. Also joining us today is Alexandra August, writer for Geek Magazine, as well as the host of my favorite Game of Thrones podcast and her own Star Trek podcast, the perfectly titled DiscoTrek. What's more, as Star Trek Discovery has gone on, and I have read and listened to her thoughts, Alex has revealed herself to be a predictor unmatched in her ability to see the future of Star Trek Discovery. She is the Trekstradamus. I still gotta workshop that a little bit. Sonia is on assignment. So episode 13, What's Past Is Prologue. Actually, Alex, I just have to start with you. I'm gonna just jump over the plot summary. I'm sure people have seen episode 13. Lorca springs his plan. Fight. Holy smokes, did this feel like a Game of Thrones episode? What was it like to see Star Trek and Game of Thrones so completely match each other?
It was, I thought this episode was really lovely. It was really exciting to see Star Trek get this dark and know that, it was kind of allowed because we were in this universe. And then also we kept cutting. What I liked was that we kept kind of juxtaposing with what was going on in the Discovery, which for the first time felt like a real Star Trek ship and a crew that was working as a unit and something that would be the anchor for a show. Everything that happened on Discovery kind of felt like it had a Next Generation feel to it, especially juxtaposed with the darkness of what was going on in the Mirror Universe. And then the Mirror Universe, we get this kind of great caper with Michael Burnham facing off between two characters and kind of forging alliances and games and action scenes that I thought made use of the universe really well. The fact that Giorgio has guns to fight. Guns that she can just activate from a wristlet, and then there we had that. It was lots of full of really, really beautiful shots, like the one where Lorca shoots his phaser at her, and you see the blast go straight and bounce right into a force field right in front of her face, and she doesn't flinch. So I feel like, I don't know if I likened it to Game of Thrones kind of shot for shot, but it did feel like those kinds of personalities facing off. The ones we got in Battle of the Bastards or something like that. It felt like the stakes were that high.
Yeah, exactly. For me, that's it.
And there was a moon door.
That's what I was gonna say. Is between that weird, almost Iron Throne thing, that circle of spike things that she's always kind of standing in front of. Then you got the moon door. Then you got the holy shit is hitting the fan. All the chess pieces have been put into place by the beginning of this episode. So this episode is essentially all fight, all resolve. It felt very slow, wind up, big payoff HBO Game of Thrones style show storytelling that we've talked about for, weeks on this show, and seeing it finally all start to unravel, or not unravel, but unleash itself was very satisfying. Jeff, what were your thoughts?
A lot of things came to fruition this week.
Yes.
I'm gonna be like a wet blanket on this whole thing. I have to say, and I agree that all the pyrotechnics and especially the big gun battle in the corridor wherever they were, the death of Lorca, all of that stuff was very spectacular, and I thought the gun battle in particular was very well thought out. But I have to say, we're about at the end of this season, and I really feel like the first few episodes actually set on the Discovery. I felt like the writing was strong, the characters were very sharp, and I felt a sense that the people behind the show knew where they were headed and were laying the groundwork for things. And they obviously were to a point, but I have really felt like the actual writing on the show in terms of dialogue and in terms of making character actions and decisions clear has kind of devolved from maybe the middle of the first half of the season. And particularly, I think once we started getting to the episode where we're on the planet and Saru's running around, kind of unleashed, I feel like there's been kind of a steady decline in terms of promising a lot of dramatic payoff and not really delivering. And we have one more episode to go. Granted, this was a very spectacular.
We've got two
episode, which had we have two more episodes.
Yeah.
So there's two more following. Okay, so there's time to pull out of this nosedive. This was very exciting, and obviously we've had like these two major character reveals. I'd say the one thing that I was very surprised by and didn't expect, and obviously, since we've got two episodes to go, there's plenty of time to deal with it. But I was surprised. I was surprised that Burnham grabs Giorgio and saves her and brings her on board the Discovery. I think we all talked about the idea, which I think we found kind of exciting, that Burnham was going to have to kill Giorgio again, since Giorgio's the Emperor. And it's actually, I think, kind of fascinating in a way that she instead chooses to save her. My problem with this whole last couple of episodes is it's seeming to me to become kind of unhinged what Burnham is doing and what her motivations are. And maybe I'm just like not looking at this right, and you guys, it's clearer to you guys. I guess she has some master plan about all this, but the way that it plays, just on the face of it, it seems like she's supporting Giorgio, that she has a real emotional connection to her, and it is allowing Giorgio to manipulate her into being an ally, when we clearly present Giorgio as an evil emperor. Given that she's attained the status of emperor, sort of the only way to do that in the mirror universe is by being the most hardcore evil person around. And that actually kind of brings up the whole idea of what this mirror universe is. I actually read a quote from Jason Isaacs, I think yesterday, where he said that it wasn't like the mirror universe, as shown here, was not like the kind of classic evil goatee universe that we see in original Star Trek, and maybe even in Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, but that the characters are not necessarily, yin and yang opposites of what they are in the other universe, and that almost adds to the confusion in a way, because another thing that I talked about was how the idea that the security officer who gets killed, Landry, early in the show, I was thinking, oh well, the reason she acts like an idiot is because she's from the mirror universe. But in this episode, we meet, I guess, the real mirror universe Landry. I was sort of expecting that was going to be the real universe Landry. But the problem is there doesn't seem to be any difference between the mirror universe Landry and the real universe
Yeah, I
Landry.
actually
They're both the same
preferred
character.
the mirror universe Landry. I liked. Yeah, for the most part. I actually thought I thought Prime Landry was far more aggressive and annoying than Mirror Universe Landry, who seemed to have a pretty.
But really, that's in the context of. Yeah, I mean that in the context of like a normal Starfleet ship. If you put either of those characters there, I don't see how they would act any differently. Maybe the Mirror Universe Land one that we see is a little bit more measured, but it's a totally different situation. So I am right now just kind of profoundly confused as to how we're supposed to be taking Burnham's actions and what her relationship with Giorgio is. I think it's fascinating if there's some kind of, Stockholm syndrome going on, and that Burnham's actually kind of losing her moorings as an officer. But then you see a lot of the actions that, almost everything that she does when we see her basically in relationship with the Discovery and the Discovery crew, it seems like everything she's doing is very carefully planned. So I guess that there is some end game here, but what would the end game be in bringing the Mirror Universe Giorgio into our universe? I mean, you have your captain, sort of, and her life is saved, but this is not the same person. And what is she going to spend? Is she going to try to rehabilitate her? It's just like very, very fuzzy to me. And honestly, I love Michelle Yeoh as kind of an icon, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is like one of my all-time favorite movies. But I'm not sure I'd say she has the acting chops to play both an evil, megalomaniacal emperor and a character that has a lot of shadings and maybe some hidden reservoir of humanity that is appealing to Burnham. I don't know that I see that in the performance, and that, from my perspective, it winds up making Burnham look bad and like just kind of stupid. And I sort of just don't know what's going on with it. So maybe you guys can explain what her plan is or what's going on, because right now it's kind of crippling my relationship with the character.
Well, I hear what you're saying. From my impression was essentially she got herself into a corner. She tried to kind of keep her head down, act like she belonged. There came the moment when she just said, fuck it, I'm going to tell you the story. We're from the mirror universe, or we're from the Prime universe. We're here in your universe. Because of the connection between Burnham and the Emperor in the mirror universe, or the mirror universe Burnham and the Emperor, there was this kind of weird connection where they both kind of wanted to have some sort of relationship, but at the same time they both realized it's not really our relationship, so what exactly are we doing? Then it seemed to become the Emperor using her to retain power, and Burnham essentially improvising just to keep her and Discovery alive for long enough until she could figure out something to do. Then Lorca's plan, essentially to take over the Empire, seemed to work. They were able to have some, reversal, but at the same time, the Emperor, all her loyalists were murdered. So she realized the jig was up. She was going to go out on her feet. And maybe Burnham just said, you know what? I've lost enough in the entire, in this season. I've lost enough. I've been through all this stuff. I'm not going to lose Giorgio for a second time, even though I know it's not Giorgio, but it's kind of Giorgio, and screw it, I'm going to grab her in a kind of last minute. I guess my point is, I don't think there was some big, large, thought out plan that.
No, I don't think there was a plan at all.
Michael has been unraveling this whole time. It's just she's kind of catching as catch can. And I do think, while I had a lot of fun with this, and while it did feel like an HBO show it's winding up, and now it's really taking off like a rocket, is that it is a lot of this episode was look at us have our big battle kind of thing. It was like we've been winding it all up, and it's just we're gonna have our fun, we're gonna have our big fights, and despite the fight was pretty spectacular, I thought the action was pretty well done. There were a lot of clever moments and shots and reversals and all that. I do think, though, there is a level with these mirror universe, and maybe it's their costumes or something. There is a level of cheese that I think maybe people were not expecting, or I was not expecting from a modern incarnation of Star Trek, where in certain shots and certain lights, these costumes look very 1930s Flash Gordon Art Deco, patterns and stuff. So it at once, it's at the same time, it looks very modern, very fantastic, photoreal, while at the same time looking kind of cheesy and very high space opera. And maybe that's all that's going on. Maybe it's just they're trying to figure out a way to bring modern Star Trek cheese into the prestige television era. I don't know.
I just feel like the original Mirror Episode from the original Star Trek is one of my favorite things ever, and I've seen that dozens of times, but I just remember being on the edge of my seat about are they going to be? They established very well immediately what the danger of this universe was, and that it was that they were going to be dead basically the second anyone found out who they really were. And this, obviously you have Burnham just saying flat out who she is. In any given scene over the past couple of episodes, I guess I have just not felt the tension and suspense that the show is clearly wants me to feel, and because I don't feel like the writing and plotting has paid off in terms of setting all this stuff up, so I know what the actual stakes are. I mean, I'm sort of like not sure what it means if Giorgio is the Emperor.
Right.
That's a fascinating thing about the original Mirror episode is Kirk finds out who he is. He realizes he is a monster in this universe, and so he basically sets up his own assassination because he starts to realize that Spock actually has some kind of honor and something positive that can be reached, and the episode ultimately becomes about him convincing Spock to change what's going on, and I always found that tremendously exciting. So it's just clear from moment to moment and scene to scene, like what the stakes are, what the danger is, and so there's tremendous suspense, as cheesy as everything looks. you buy it and you are gripped by it. And with this, I'm just kind of mystified on what the ultimate message is and what the stakes are. And maybe it's going to become clear, but I feel sort of the same way about Burnham. I think we started off with her being very clear, and at least in my mind, what her character arc was, that she was going to be this disgraced person who has to, struggle to get the respect and get her bearings back as an officer. And I think they sort of started doing that immediately in the very first episode she's in on the Discovery, where they go on board the sister ship, and she leads the team and comes up with this very smart way of capturing this tardigrade creature, and there's a great action sequence there. And I felt like, you had really started that character along on their journey, but over the, past season, we've had her sort of get lost in this love relationship with Tyler, that again sort of to a point undermines her as a character, because we as the audience are so far ahead of her that she doesn't seem like a smart Starfleet officer, because she's not able to pick up on what everybody else has kind of already figured out. So I've been a booster of this show, and I still love the cast. Although I still don't feel like I really got enough out of Jason Isaacs. I always felt like we were sort of spinning our wheels waiting for what that character was really going to be, and then it's revealed and then he's killed, and right. It seems almost like a pattern, and not to belabor everything like I always do.
That's why we love you, Jeff.
I still go back to something someone told me about Akiva Goldsman, who I assume is still, helping to run the show, and that was that he is not interested in the little character moments and just is all about plotting, just wants to get down to the bare bones of the plot. And I think if they added 10 minutes of character moments, which they could easily do because all these episodes are 45 or 50 minutes, and there's no reason why they can't be an hour if this is really the HBO model, except that they have to have commercials, in CBS's All Access format for some reason. But I feel like we missed out on ultimately maybe a few hours of extra character development for everybody on the show, that would have maybe made me feel a little bit more invested in what was going on and interested. And I hope that that's something that they can look at for the coming season, because there's no doubt that there's been some interesting plot developments and turns, and that they've had an overall very ambitious and unique to Star Trek, story for this first season. But I think you have to be truly feeling like the characters. I think somebody else also just said that this season was like taking like the Naked Now from Next Generation and stretching it out over a whole season, which is pretty harsh. But
it's a little hyperbolic.
That's right.
It's hyperbolic, but at the same, the problem with that episode as contrasted with the inspiration for that episode in the original series was that when you watched The Naked Time, you even after like 3 or 4 episodes, you totally felt like you knew who Kirk and Spock and McCoy, and even some of the, even someone like Sulu, you knew when he was acting out of character. And on this show, I'm not sure you would know if anybody was acting out of character after a whole season, because we've had them all do such crazy things supposedly in character, and kind of contradict themselves from episode to episode. I don't feel that they have really kind of solidified all these people, except for maybe Saru, and maybe Tilly as characters. Everyone else seems to be, we've got Stamets is affected by the spore, so we never know what's going on with him from episode to episode. And these other characters have like Lorca is, we don't know what's going on with him until he's revealed as being from the mirror universe. So that, I guess that's my giant, 45-minute statement about this. Is I wish that they had taken the time to really define these characters. And I think that they seem like they were going to, the beginning of the season, it seemed like they were well on their way to doing that. But in paying off all these other kind of larger plot threads, I feel like they've sacrificed some of the necessary character development that would have made this stuff. It should have been thrilling, and you should have truly been on the edge of your seat, not because, oh, wow, I'm seeing this incredible action sequence and I've never seen a phaser fight like this on Star Trek, which is true.
Right.
But what's going to happen to the character? Oh, my God, what's going to happen to Burnham in the scene? I haven't been feeling, and that's what I should be feeling.
Alex, I want to throw something by you. Or unless you had something to contribute to Jeff's fantastic filibuster.
I did not really agree regarding the character development for the most part. I thought that a lot of things really beautifully came to fruition this episode. I think we got to see Lorca sort of threatening this villainy for all season, and then we got to see him really go full mustache twirl, sneering, deserves a cape, full villain this week, which is kind of all I needed of that. Like, I wouldn't want, son of a bitch. I wouldn't really, I don't know that I would want him to do this. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm not being articulate. I don't know that I would have wanted much more of this Lorca. I think that the reason the Mirror Universe worked this time around was, or I think the reason the Mirror Universe worked in Discovery so well, at least it did for me, was because they took it very seriously and they parsed out what it would actually be like to live day to day in this kind of environment, in this kind of political state. And I don't think the Emperor would be as completely black-hearted and as irredeemable as she would be if they met the Mirror Emperor, because at the end of the day, she still has to manage this empire, and there's no way you can do that without some kind of trust and with some kind of relationships. So it makes sense to me that she wouldn't be as much of a loose cannon as Lorca, that she would definitely believe in racial purity and do whatever she could to achieve that, which is obviously not very admirable. But at the same time, I was kind of fine with the fact that she wasn't really somebody that she wasn't as an outlandish a villain as we would have normally expected from the Mirror Universe. It made sense to me, and I feel like it made, because I don't think you can really joke or be campy about this type of political situation in this political day and age. I think they had to take it a little bit. I think they had to ground it a little bit more. And then I thought it was really cool that, the actual fight scene in the throne room mirrors the fight scene on the sarcophagus ship between T'Kuvma and Vogue and Michael and Georgiou. They have a very similar one between Lorca, Landry, Michael, and Georgiou. And it feels like we saw the journey that Burnham's made in terms of her self-confidence, and in terms of, if you look at it in the first episode, it really her self-confidence really depends. And the fact that she commits an action that she views as a betrayal of her captain, and not as an action that might have saved the Federation to a degree because it alerted them to this alliance and war. The fact that she looks at it in terms of the fact that it got her captain killed says a lot about her character. And I feel like we look at her now and she's alone most of this. She's kind of a rogue. She's kind of a maverick most of this time because she doesn't have a plan. So she's running around this, again, this time very independently, making her own choices, and much more certain in those choices. It was kind of like, it's like she grew up.
Right.
I thought that was really well realized. And I feel like that's been her journey most of the time, is just struggling with how to be, given this brand new identity of a mutineer, as somebody who's always been a high achiever. I feel like it's sort of like somebody who went to Harvard reaching their 20s and not getting a job. And then I also I was kind of excited for the Emperor thing because I don't see how she's going to function in our Prime universe. But I could totally see why. I think that's been Burnham's danger from the beginning. And I think I thought it would come to a head a little bit sooner. But I think it's going to be a huge problem that while Burnham is a blind spot for Georgiou, Georgiou is a blind spot for Burnham. And I think we're going to see that. I think that's why we have 2 episodes left, maybe, so that Burnham can really realize that this isn't her Georgiou as much as she might want it to be. And I don't know, shoot, she was going to die anyway. I get the idea that she would grab her and take her back to the Discovery, because why waste a Georgiou?
I think I see both sides of what both of you are talking about. And I think I find myself agreeing with elements of each one. And I'm wondering if this is the peril of kind of modern, I don't want to say prestige television, but kind of extended season storytelling, which is you lay down all these plot points. And, we've talked about this previously on this podcast. And, it's kind of a thing that people have been talking about for the last 10 years with the 10-year anniversary of Breaking Bad, which is you lay down all these markers at the beginning of the season. We're going to have Ash secretly be Voke. Lorca is going to be from the Mirror Universe, and eventually we're going to go to the Mirror Universe, and his plan's going to be revealed, and then something's going to happen, and Michael will find out, and then something. So they have all this stuff up on the boards, and as they're writing to those things, you lay down all these markers, you have all these kind of twists and turns and stuff. And, sometimes, and we've seen this with, our knowledge of other Star Trek shows and just television production in general, is sometimes you get to the week where you're supposed to write the script, where it all comes together. And for one reason or another, for a production question or another, it just doesn't come together the way you thought. This might be the potential downside of trying to tease, create all these Red Wedding style big reveals and big reversals and big, shocking moments that, a lot of modern TV seems to need. If you throw all these balls up in the first half of a season, some of them might get dropped in the second half or caught not in the most satisfying way. And I'm wondering if that's kind of what's going on for you, Jeff, but it sounds as though, Alex, you're thinking, yeah, they were caught pretty good. I didn't catch on to the kind of mirror qualities of the fight on the sarcophagus ship at the beginning of the season to the, the fight on the Emperor ship here, but I think there's something to that.
I felt certainly when I was watching, Georgiou and Burnham fighting together against, an enemy, a common enemy, that certainly was a riff on the fight from the second sort of pilot episode. I guess I just feel like I was thinking I had sort of a similar reaction to all of this that I had to like Rogue One when I watched that, which was that by the time they got to the end and I realized that the characters were going to die, which was a surprise, but it wasn't a shocking, like, oh my God, they're going to die. I remember I was thinking to myself, oh, they're going to die. That's interesting. So my reactions to a lot of this sort of, shocking, I had sort of felt the same way when Burnham brings Georgiou onto the Discovery. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect that, but I'm not feeling pulled in to the point where I would have, a Game of Thrones level emotional reaction to it. And I was thinking also that, like, on, even on kind of mediocre episodes of Game of Thrones, there's usually at least a couple of fantastic character scenes.
Right.
And, Game of Thrones would have episodes like, where you would follow, Brienne of Tarth and Jaime Lannister hanging out. or the Hound, and who's the youngest?
Aria.
Aria. I mean, where you just follow the relationship between two characters and all we're sort of getting out of Discovery is you've got a romantic relationship between Tyler and Burnham, which I don't find tremendously satisfying. And I'm not sure.
Well, I think that's also pretty. I'll be surprised if that continues in any capacity.
Yeah, I totally would too. And I'm sort of interested in seeing. I also feel like they could easily kill everyone in the cast except for Saru and Burnham. And I almost feel like they're going to do that. They've certainly kind of hinted that it could be the end for Stamets. Tyler certainly seems like it would be very logical to have him die. So I guess I could see. I don't see any reason to kill Tilly, and I don't see.
Oh God, they can't kill Tilly.
Obviously, yeah. Burnham. I think Burnham, Saru, and Tilly seem pretty safe to me. But the other ones, like you said, they're sort of like higher profile. Anthony Rapp is like this Broadway actor, and I almost feel like they kind of got these sort of slightly bigger name actors in the show, and that could be rotated out and replaced with other bigger names. They also said something. I heard one of the producers saying, "Well, we actually haven't seen main engineering yet, and we don't know who the engineer." The real engineer of the Discovery is.
Oh, I noticed that.
Which is kind of a shocking develop. And so that really, to me, also indicates that maybe, Anthony Rapp is not going to be on the show by the end of and that we're going to have, a real warp drive engineer.
Right.
Be a character next season, but that's just all kind of weird to me. That's the weird. If that all happens, that makes this. I mean, the most.
Well, it hasn't happened yet.
Ever. And it has, exactly. It hasn't, but
the most show ever?
We've got at least. I mean, just the most unique in terms of use of a.
Right.
We've never had a Star Trek show that basically would wipe out, half or more of its cast in the first season,
right? And
then go with different, maybe you're going to have a substantially different cast every season. I think would be interesting, but
that's a good segue, I would say, then to where we ended this episode and where it looks like the final two episodes are pointing, which is the Discovery gets back to the Prime universe. But they get back at a time 9 months after they left, supposedly. The Klingons, it looks like, have won the war or significantly advanced in the war, leading me to believe that there's some... And they hinted several times when they were using the spore, the mycelial network or whatever to get from the mirror universe back, that... when you move through these two universes, the timing is a little suspect or whatever. I tweeted out during the show that, what are the chances that this show ends up, the reason we've never heard of Discovery or Michael Burnham anymore or any of this stuff in Star Trek canon, which they said that they would explain, is because the last act of this show could be, oh, look, we skipped ahead 200 years and that's where the rest of Discovery is going to take place or something. I don't know. What do you...
Well, they have 2 episodes.
Heard of the Discovery.
What was that?
They have 2 episodes left. They have stated that the Klingon story is wrapped up at the end of the first season.
Right.
So they have 2 episodes to, win the war. They sort of hint that Giorgio is going to help them. So I guess she's so devious she understands how to beat
biological weapons.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, my guess is it's going to be more some kind of time, reset.
Right.
But even that kind of opens up, you go back. It's called Discovery, so I don't think she's going to go back in time and beat, first officer on the Shinzu. And so, I mean, I am very interested to see how they wrap up the season. But at the same time, I was very interested about a lot of earlier plot questions. And then when they got answered, I was not interested by the answer a lot of times. So I'm a little bit pessimistic, but still very curious about, how they're going to handle Giorgio and some other, Tyler and all these things, how all that's going to be wrapped up.
Right.
2 episodes to do it.
You know what? I don't know where my head is. I have Trekstradamus here on the show. I don't even know why I'm asking you these questions, Jeff.
I know, right? But
Alex,
did you now? Did
Quiet
Alex
you. Quiet
I
you.
know she predicted
That's right.
that Giorgio was going to that Burnham was going to take Giorgio onto the Discovery.
Well,
No, I was super wrong about that.
all right. Well, okay.
I was very wrong about that.
You only got 85% of the stuff right. Then, I guess.
I don't know how anybody could have predicted that.
So, Alex,
that was truly a surprise.
Where do you think? What's your feeling on where the rest of this season is going, and what you think is going to happen?
I think we're probably looking at some kind of time reset, just because we haven't, no Klingon war has lasted this long, and supposedly all of Discovery's major departures from canon will be explained. And considering they've been pretty meticulous, I would say, at maintaining certain parts of canon while veering wildly from others, I think they're going to make good on their promise, and we're going to get to a point where this Klingon war never happened. I don't know how that will be achieved, or if they'll do something... if the Discovery will do something that will make it what it is supposedly in Star Trek canon at this point, which is a fairly short Cold War, or a very small skirmish, and then entering into a Cold War for some period of time before the events of Next Generation or Star Trek 6. So that's what my money's on. I don't see how Giorgio can survive in this universe, so either she's going to that can only really go one of 2 ways. She's going to sort of show her true colors and betray everyone who's helped her just in a power grab, because I don't understand how you go from being an emperor to being just the evil twin of someone that everyone really liked in this universe. So I'm not really certain how that would manifest itself, but that's what my money's on. I think we're going to explore that relationship a little bit more, but I kind of don't. I feel like Michael Burnham's redeemed herself and figured out her mom and dad issues, and things are good. I'm really curious to see how the L'Rell and Vogue stuff shakes out. I like that character quite a bit, and it looks like we're going to see her talk to Admiral Cornwell again next week, and that was a matchup that I really enjoyed the first time we got it. So they need to pay some lip service to the Klingons, because that's one thing that I'll come out and say was a total, kind of mismanaged, was the Klingon War this season, because to me was not, I'm not a huge Klingon fan to begin with, and so I was never super interested in this war. But if they don't have a rabbit out of a hat in the last 2 episodes to pull with it, it'll make this season feel very unbalanced to me.
No, I hear you. I'm almost... It seems as though the plotters of this show like to have cool, tricky, either surprises or reversals or whatever. I'm almost wondering if they are going to have some sort of, hey, they've established that the mycelial network is a troublesome way to travel, that it looks as though because of the damage that the Mirror Universe Terrans did to it, they can't use it all that much longer. I'm almost wondering if they are going to somehow jump back to the Battle of the Binary Stars, keep the war from getting out of control, and then realize, oh, we're kind of a ship out of time. We're people out of time. We need, we can't stay here and mess up the Prime universe. We've got to go into the future or go somewhere else, or maybe the season will end with them going into some radically different place. I don't know. I feel as though there's some big
that.
Yeah. No, what were you going to say?
That to me sounds like just doing Voyager again.
Right.
It's gonna, if they're just going to be out someplace.
Maybe correctly.
I think the idea of the show has to be relating it to the whole Star Trek universe. And
I hear you.
I don't
let me
throwing that
amend
whole
that.
idea away after one season.
No, I agree. Let me amend that. And part of what occurred to me when I was thinking, I just came up with this theory just right now and kind of thinking through the plot threads that they still have to finish, is I believe Brian Fuller originally wanted an anthology style show where each season is in a different Star Trek era, and I'm wondering if that might be a way. So essentially, Discovery ends this story, and they don't venture away in some Voyager style fashion, but they say, we've got to go to the far, far future. We've got to go wherever, and so this ship actually does move between different Star Trek eras, and that's what this show is. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that comes up with a whole host of ridiculous questions if they do that.
Well, they've also more or less said that by the end of the series, you're going to have like a lead in, some kind of connection to the James Kirk era, and who knows how seriously they meant that. But I don't see them. They've talked about how you're going to see technology and things kind of evolve closer to that. I can see them shaking up the cast and the situation, and they really almost have to. They're going to have to address the spore drive idea at some point, and whether and they sure seem to be leading to wrapping that up in this season, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of not sure what you do with the show to make it what it is after that, because it seemed to be so much about that. But it is kind of fascinating. They've said that like season 2 might be a little bit more conventional Star Trek than what we've seen in this season. I just hope that, I just feel like they've set up so much stuff that is interesting, and I just wish they built a little bit more into it to make me feel it more. I still feel a little bit distanced from this show, and I really want to. I've loved moments, I think, from all the characters, but it's not like I can't wait to tune in to my favorite characters this week. It's more like I hope to have a moment somewhere where I could feel like I like I'm into these characters, because there seems to be a lot of time where I'm just not sure how I'm supposed to be feeling about them.
Right. Alex, is there anything else that you would like to say? Any other predictions you would like to drop before we wrap this episode up?
No, I'm being much more cautious since this week. I think we're gonna. I'm still remaining in the camp of it's really hard to judge this season before it's over, because it keeps kind of twisting in ways that I didn't expect. So I am really excited for the next 2 episodes, specifically for Cornwell and Laurel, and just to see how this all shakes out. And this is also, I'm like kind of a pig in shit right now because I like dystopic Federation stuff. So like Yesterday's Enterprise is one of my favorite movies, which is another story about the Federation losing a war against the Klingons. So I like it when the Federation's an underdog. So I'm expecting to enjoy the next 2 episodes a whole lot. And I'm really curious to see how it ends. I'm trying to manage my expectations, though.
Right. All right. Alex, Jeff, thank you for joining us for this episode, this deep dive into Star Trek Discovery. We will see you next week for episode 14. I don't have the title at hand, but episode 14 of Discovery. So for Sonia Mansfield,
the war without and the war within.
That's right. Thank you. See, she predicted even that. So for Jeff, Sonia, and Alex, bye. The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can also find me at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show.
And you can read all about my random adventures at my blog, thesoniashow.com, and track the slow, creeping process of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com.
Yeah, you know what? Go right over there right now and see how much is going on jetjurgens.com. Anyway, it'll be fun. It'll be like a trip back to 2016. Anyway, you can find out more about the Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com, and while you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Please, for the love of God, for some reason, Apple Podcasts holds our destiny in their hands, so go over there and give us a rating, please. Sorry.
We would do it for you. We have a handy link on our website. It'll whisk you right over there so you can gush your love all over us.
This is disgusting.
It's disgusting.
Why did you write it like
I think
this, Sonia?
you
I
wrote it
didn't
like
write
that.
it like this. I don't like this.
We would gush love all over you and your podcast.
Yeah, we would do that. Anyway, point
Gushing.
is, I think we might be re-recording this here in a moment.
Gushing.
Jesus. What kind of podcast are you turning this into?
One that people will listen to.
This has been a presentation of Rocket Spots Media.